some other thoughts on how teams are gearing up for the playoffs and are they keeping things the same or are they doing things differently?
Well, first of all, the Giant Dodger thing, throw whatever you think out the window. I mean, that's a rivalry. And I've been part of that when I was with the Dodgers. So it doesn't matter what you say or do. Who knows what's going to happen there? That's always a nightmare. Even when they were supposed to be bad, they'd play it tough, and when they were really good, you could go in there and beat them, and it felt so good just to beat them that it was always fun. So I don't know what'll happen there. I for whatever reason, I still have a good feeling about the Dodgers. And I thought that the Giants played a little bit above their head, but they did it all year. So maybe I underestimated them is all. But I still have a good feeling about the Dodgers. I think what most clubs, when you're preparing for where they're at right now, they're preparing for this in July. Because the trading deadline's the end of July 31st or 30th, whatever they had it this year. So that's the thing. I mean, you're trying to put everything in place and make sure you cover all your depth and handle everything. Now, a player's got to be on your roster before the end of August. So the problem they have with the Dodgers, like Muncy getting hurt, and that looked pretty bad. So I don't know when he'll actually be back. But as far as that goes, the planning and preparation starts well back. And you can maybe even see before the season for those clubs that thought they had a chance. But in terms of where they're at right now, I think it all depends on the manager and how they want to handle the players. In Boston, I know they made some roster moves where like Barnes is not going to be on this next round. Who was it? Barnes, and I think they took somebody else off who you would think would be on the playoff roster, and they're not on there. So I think every club's got to make the decision on who's going to be on the roster and who matches up well against this team. But at the same time, I think the majority of the managers are going to want to go with who got them there. And they almost feel that sense of loyalty to the players that probably help the most in getting there. Unless there's some type of injury situation where a player might not be 100%. But I don't think you see teams deviate too much. And I'll bring up an example. It's like, Charlie Montoya lives in town, and Charlie's a manager of Toronto Blue Jays. And we were talking before spring training, we were having lunch. And over here at Saguaro Corners out here on the east side of town. And we were having lunch and we were talking about Snell getting pulled from the playoffs. When he got pulled, a lot of people think prematurely, and Tampa Bay ends up losing the World Series, blah, 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 blah. And when I was talking to Charlie about it, because Charlie had a long history with Tampa Bay. In fact, we hired him when I was in Tampa Bay. We were starting the club. And so Charlie and I have known each other a long time, and we were talking about that scenario and how major league managers now have to deal with all the information they get and all the data that they get and how they operate. But Charlie made an interesting point. He said, people talk about that, but they were doing that all year long. So for them, it was really no different. He goes, and there are situations where when you operate like that during the season, he found it difficult for a lot of guys to change just because of the playoffs. And that's what I'm saying. I think managers are going to do what they do and what got them there. I don't think they're going to deviate much once they get to the playoffs, whether that be how you look at your personnel, your player personnel, or how you look at making decisions. I think you're gonna do the things right. It's what's the old saying? Dance with who brung you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you'll see in the playoffs. I don't think you'll see much different. The one thing that you do see more in the playoffs, and we'll see how it plays out this year, is the use of the sacrifice bunt. which you'd go all year long and nobody would ever sacrifice. And then you get in the playoffs and all of a sudden sacrificing is important. And then, you know, if you're in the front office or just a baseball fan, you go, how do you make this guy try to bunt when you never bunted all year long with this guy? That to me was a debate that should have been had a few years back. Watching just the wild card games, I don't think we saw anybody except for a pitcher bunt, but because sacrifice bunting is basically going out the window these days. But it'll be interesting how much we actually see that in the playoffs with players that haven't bunted. So getting back to the point of Charlie, he wasn't defending, and we were taking no position. We were just talking about that whole situation and how managers deal with data and what they have to go through to try to figure out how to make their decisions in the course of a game, or in that case, in the course of the World Series game. And I think you'll see them pretty much stay true to what they did all year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told since I've played sports since I was 5, just keep it the same. Doesn't matter the game, just keep it the same. And that's easier said than done. So how are these? I know the coaches are probably telling the players, hey, it's just another game, just another game. How hard is it for the players and even the coaches to actually like keep that motto like in reality, practice that in reality?
I don't, it's not another game. I don't think anybody in their right mind would try to tell them it's just another game at that level. I mean, they all know. And the difference is in this type of thing with playoffs and World Series, I mean, these can become historical games. Just ask Bill Buckner, right?
Yeah.
1986, ball goes through the wickets. They're still showing it all the time. And players understand that. When they're playing in a World Series or playing in the playoffs, especially in that city, right? I mean, everybody, Bartman in Chicago, he wasn't even a player, and they're still talking about him, right? I mean, these things, this stuff can be historical. So, you know, it's the same way of either making a big mistake or doing whatever or getting a big hit. I think the players at that level aren't worried about making a mistake. They just happen to them, but because they will make them, but they're not worried about making them. Where they're more, probably their focus is on, and that's where you see a lot of low scoring games in the playoffs and World Series, almost like those long extra inning games where everybody's trying to hit a homer because they want to be the hero. So you tend to see low scoring games. I think, one, you have great pitching because those teams are playing at the end of the season in October because they have great pitching and they got a great bullpen. But at the same time, the hitters are putting extra pressure on themselves to do something fantastic because they all know they can be a hero, and they'll be a hero for a long time. You know, they could be 70 years old and 80 years old and somebody's carting them out to the field because they got a big hit in the playoffs or World Series or did something that is historic for that town or that city and that franchise. And that's what I mean. So I think that's something that goes on, but it's not another game. And they all know that. And the anticipation and the excitement of them playing is way overboard in that clubhouse before they go rolling out. These guys are ready to go and they cannot wait to get out there. No matter what injuries they've had all year, no matter how bad, they're all just running on adrenaline. They're worn out. And that's what I don't think people understand. These guys are worn out mentally and physically, but that adrenaline just keeps driving, and they're at the top of their game when they're playing in these things.
Do you think before the night of like game 1, for example, you know, NLDS or ALDS, you think any of these guys are getting any sleep?
Yeah, I think it all depends on the guy probably, but you know, some of them might not sleep that well before a big game. Others are going to. I think they're beyond that. I think it's more, they've played in so many baseball games by the time they get to this point that it's just, I would say probably, they're definitely anticipating it and anxious, but I don't think they're nervous to the point of not being able to sleep. I just think it's more anxious than anything to get going, to get out on the field and start putting the ball in the air a little bit, let them get through their first AB, all that type of thing. And then they're ready. That stuff's all cleared out. They're up there playing and they don't even hear the crowd or whatever. They're so locked in on what they're doing. These guys are pros, man. They've played a lot of ball games. So
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting stuff with October. We're in October and the World Series is fast approaching. It'll be interesting to see what happens. One more thing I wanted to ask you. So you kind of touched on it. We talked about Blake Snell getting pulled last year in the World Series. We saw kind of a similar thing last night with the Cardinals Dodgers. They pulled the Cardinals pitcher, the relief pitcher in the ninth. He got 2 straight outs and then he gave up a walk to Bellinger, and they pulled them, and then the walk-off home run happened. What's the thinking there? Would you just leave your reliever in after a walk when he got 2 straight outs, or do you kind of agree with the polling of him?
well, first of all, anytime a manager's making a decision and almost 24 hours later we're trying to decide what should have been done, if you have 2 guesses, I'll take the second guess. Okay, you can have the first one, and I'm going to be right all the time with the second guess. I think that's one of those things that, to me, they're looking at a matchup and how things going and da 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 da, and trying to decide what to do. I guess I don't know. I'm not in there. I don't know exactly what the decision making process was, but at the same time, for me, this guy's going to close it out. Close it out. Let's go and let's get out of here. So, I mean, for me, I just hate trying to pick at somebody making decisions and that type of thing. I just think it's so difficult when you're trying to do this and you got all this information, and when things don't work out, they don't work out. Now, I know for fans and whatever, but you're asking me. So I know a lot of people are going to be upset, and, the Twitter mob is going nuts. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. Go have at it, Twitter. That's what you do. But at the same time, for me, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that pitcher. I don't know what the matchup stats and all the things going on and how they made that decision. I could just tell you that, those are professional guys and they made a decision. It didn't turn out too well. But at the same time, I mean, if you're asking me just first blush, I think anybody would say that we would, keep the guy in there.
Yeah, and it's easy for any fan. It's easy for me to, say they should have left them in, but anyone can be in what they say, a Monday morning quarterback. It's so much harder when you're actually up there making those decisions in real time.
That's what I mean. If you're going to try to analyze the clinical exam here, I can't. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to second guess somebody, because I'm always going to be right if I'm second guessing. Right? I want the second guess. You can have the first one, and you're going to be right sometimes and wrong sometimes. I'm going to be right every time. So that's why I think, anybody that's had to deal in that stuff and be around people that have had to make those managers. I hate getting on a manager because they're in there in the heat of the battle. They're trying to do everything they think is right. Nobody's trying to lose a game. That situation didn't work out well for them, and whatever. But I'm not one to criticize managers when they make some type of in-game management decision. That's they thought at the time that that's what they should do, and that's their freedom of managing a club. And we don't know all that was going on in there, or how that guy felt, or what his stats are after X amount of pitches. That's when he typically blows up or whatever. I mean, we don't know all that stuff.